So meanwhile, while the NFC East was represented in the NFC title game between the Commanders and the Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys made some news because
they're representing.
Yeah, who needs
strong hire?
Hey, who needs Deion Sanders? And furthermore, who needs Mike McCarthy when you can just, bump up the offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, and make him your brand new head coach? We kind of speculated this is where this was headed on Friday. And here we are. Brian Schottenheimer finally gets his opportunity, finally gets his crack at being a head coach. His dad, obviously a legend, former coach of LaVar Arrington and the Washington Commandos. But Brian Schottenheimer is the brand new coach of the Cowboys.
What's the outrage, man? Why are people so outraged about the hire?
Can I give you a reason why they're probably outraged?
Yes.
My guess is this. This whole entire situation in Dallas was not by design. This was not planned. This team thought they were going to have Mike McCarthy back. They obviously came to the negotiating table, and whatever was presented to Mike McCarthy, they thought he was going to accept. So instead of accepting it, and we don't know what those terms are exactly, he says, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so he walks away. And now you're thinking to yourself, if you're a Cowboys fan, like, this is the Dallas Cowboys, man. It's that team with the star on the helmet. 3 Super Bowls. It seems like forever ago now. But still, the most valued franchise in all of professional sports. Who wouldn't want to be the head coach of it?
Who wouldn't want to?
And meanwhile, we can't hire anyone else outside of the actual organization. So they hire and elevate Brian Schottenheimer. And that's not to say that Brian or Schotty's not going to be a good head coach. First chance to do it. So we'll see what he's able to do.
He's been around a while too.
He's been around forever.
Yeah, he's been around.
He's been around forever. And by the way, he's a good dude. Good offensive mind.
Good dude.
Like, Schotty is fun, man. I remember sitting in offensive installs and be going through the reads, bang bang. That's how he talked, kind of going through the I was here, bang bang. But and he's got some great Spur stories. But my question is, like, this isn't plan A. This isn't maybe even plan B.
Yikes.
Because wouldn't you want to have the guy that was his head coach as the head coach if you just want to keep continuity for Dak and everything else instead of just elevating Brian Schottenheimer from underneath him? Yeah. I mean, this is a complete 180 from when this team was talking about moving on from Mike McCarthy. It was for Dan Quinn because of how well the defense was performing and obviously his rapport with the team and relationship with a lot of players on that team. Well, now he just got his team to the NFC Championship game. You let him walk out the door. So instead you go with, another coach on your staff. But I think that's why. Like, Dallas Cowboys fans are just completely surprised that, and I'm trying to think who said this on TV. I think it was Troy Aikman. He's like, it's not as valued or coveted as it once was as a job, as a head coaching position.
Troy Aikman said that. Yep.
Yeah, Troy said it. And it's true. It's just not.
It's just proof they butchered the whole thing. And when you start throwing out names like, well, maybe Belichick would take it. Nah. Well, maybe Deion would take it. Yeah, well, I mean, Kellen Moore. I mean, look at what he's done with Philly. All right, we'll just go with Brian Schottenheimer and just announce it on a Friday afternoon and say, all right, everybody enjoy conference championship weekend. It's like, there's no way this is what the plan was. And I don't even know if it's plan C.
Can I ask you guys this? When looking at possible coaching candidates for the job, don't you think they got an idea of what the coaches that would have been the most reasonable, sensible hires? And again, this is no shade towards Schottenheimer, but don't you think in the conversations, like, okay, it was confirmation that he spoke to Deion at one point. I mean, I'm certain Jerry Jones spoke to several different coaches or more about the job. If I'm looking at this team and I'm looking at the roster and I'm looking at who's making the decisions on the team and on the roster, don't you think you got, like, we talked about Bulky and all the conversations that were coming from Jacksonville and how this, that, and the other. I mean, don't you have a Trent Baalke in Dallas like 2 times over? Don't you think like the conversations that coaches are, well, I mean, let's be honest. Don't you think the conversations that you're having as a coach, a possible coach, are geared around how can I have success if I take this job? Like, don't you got to have that conversation like immediately right up front if Jerry Jones calls you? Otherwise, aren't you just setting yourself up to have ultimately the same demise as any other coach that's coached for them in the last, decade or more? It just doesn't seem like it's set up for a coach to go in there and have success. So if that's the case, don't you think that that's the questions that these coaches would be asking coming into it? And it almost seems as though it seems like, all right, if I can't get this, like with Jacksonville, if I can't do this void of Trent Baalke, I don't want the job. Do you feel like that, is that a conversation that takes place between Jerry Jones and the possible candidates that the high-end ones, the high-level guys?
Well, I mean, maybe, but he is Trent Baalke, so it's like he's the owner and GM, so it's like can't move on from himself.
Yeah, so how do you have that conversation? Because if you can't have that conversation, then how do you take the job? Because you're going to come up short based off of the body of work that you've seen take place.
It's the same discussion people were having about Al Davis in the latter years. Like, while he's there, you can't. Now, as it turns out, maybe Al Davis wasn't the problem because that's still a bad football team and a bad franchise. But if Jerry Jones is going to be there, this just comes with the territory.
Do you just sacrifice success to get the pay? Like, give me a guaranteed contract and let's see where it goes. Like, I'll coach the team. Do you just look at it like, if I'm Brian Schottenheimer, am I looking at this situation like I'm a hope for the best, but I'm preparing for the worst, and then preparing for the worst, at least I'm getting what? He's probably got a 4-year contract, right? Probably getting a guaranteed 4-year. So I get a 4-year contract that you got to pay me, so I get 4 years to try to fix this. And if you should decide to get rid of me before that, I have time to get paid by you and then go back to being an offensive coordinator or quarterbacks coach or running backs coach or whatever coach, assistant, quality control, whatever it is. I get to prepare myself to go take another gig that's a lower paying gig until I get to the point of where I'm done getting paid by Dallas to go get another significant job. Is that like how you're supposed to approach it now?
If the check cashes, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean,
think about it. So,
is that a bad approach?
Well, no. I mean, what else is your approach going to be if you know that Jerry Jones is there and he does things oddly?
Not take it. That's the other approach. I'm not taking that job.
For Brian Schottenheimer, where else was he going to get an opportunity to be a head coach in the NFL? Nowhere. He wasn't being interviewed by anybody.
So go ahead and become a head coach.
Yes.
Get a head coach's pay.
He's been an assistant
and
for
whether
25 years.
Win or lose, like, I'm just going to jack my career up, possibly being in this situation where I know how it's going to be handled, but I get to say I was a head coach and I get head coach's pay. Is that a horrible approach?
Jerry Jones's quote afterwards when the news came out was, he's a career assistant no longer. He's now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
All right.
And I just wonder.
I don't think that has any real kick or real.
By the way,
spice.
I've only known him as Shotty. Like, that's always what everyone's called him. I've never known him to be Brian. I'm not sure.
I'm older than you, dog. I had Brian when he was young. Like, we were young.
So maybe
he was young.
But
I call him Brian. Like, I called him Brian.
So you call him Brian. You didn't call him Shotty.
No.
Everyone I know calls him Shotty.
Yeah, no, I called him Brian.
It's kind of one of the alarming things when I first saw the quote. I was like, well, everyone calls him Shotty. If you're calling him Brian, I don't know how close you are to him.
Michael Irvin.
I think it's just old. Like, if you've been around a while and you know his daddy,
Your daddy.
Your daddy, and his uncle was my coach. Me and Kurt was really tight, super tight.
Kurt Schotty?
Yeah.
Huh.
I never called him Shotties. I don't know.
You're on an island then, man.
I guess. And I wouldn't even be able to recall what my teammates called him. I don't know. It's just what I called him.
Probably Shoddy.
Kurt Schottenheimer. Kurt Schottenheimer, Brian Schottenheimer, nepotism like a mother load.
Damn.
You know what I mean?
Dang, man.
Yeah. Marty, Kurt, and Brian. There you go.
3 Shotties.
3 shotties
Yeah.
for your body.